Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to War Thunder Ground Forces. I'm Brad Templar, and yeah, sorry for being away for a little bit of time. I've been playing a lot of Dark Souls 3 and, well, not War Thunder, basically. But I'm back now, so without further ado, let's get on to the Churchill Mark III. Now, the Churchill Mark III is a Tier 2 Battle Rating 4.0 British tank, and is definitely one of the more interesting tanks of the British range, as you will soon see. Now, the Churchill Mark III has very little information on it on the internet, or, well, at all, really. And the main reason is because it was a rushed design, and indeed every Churchill before the Mark IV was absolutely riddled with problems. You see, as the war was moving through Western Europe and was sitting right on the doorstep of England, it was apparent that we needed a new design of tank, and indeed a lot of them rather quick. And since we lost a good amount of our weapons and tanks on the emergency evacuation of Dunkirk, we needed a lot of good tanks right now. But unfortunately we didn't have any, so we had to take the Churchill instead. Now, the Churchill was originally going to be the tank that would replace the Matilda and Valentine tanks. And the main design for the Churchill was based off the idea of a trench warfare. You see, the only experience we really had of full-scale World War in Europe was the First World War, so naturally the War Office decided that they would make a tank that was specifically designed to be heavily armoured and to get over things such as trenches and large exploded craters rather easily, which is what the Churchill does very well. But for you people who know a bit about the Second World War, you'll probably would have figured out by now that there was very little in the way of trench warfare, and indeed the Churchill's superior trench climbing capabilities were, well, rather irrelevant throughout pretty much the entire war. But it was too late to turn back now, and as I already stated, we really needed tanks quickly, so it went into development regardless. Now, the Churchill Mark III was part of the A20 design, and as I've already stated, that's about all there really is about them, but I will get back on to the Churchill Mark III slightly later on. Now, this is because I want to talk about the A22 design, which was the design that was actually made by Vauxhall. Now, the A22 model, like the A20, had very little time to be tested and to get rid of all of the major faults and problems with the tank. And because of this, it was once again absolutely riddled with problems. However, the British had a genius idea, one that I think goes down as one of the greatest British manufacturing workaround solutions ever, and it's this. As the A22 was coming off the factory lines, a leaflet from the manufacturer was added in a handbook saying, and I quote, "Fighting vehicles are urgently required, and instructions have been received to proceed with the vehicle as it is rather than hold up production. All those things which we know are not as they should be will be put right." Now, yeah, this document, quite literally, it was described all of the faults known with the Churchill, and then stated easy workarounds for if the problems were to happen to the crew. Yeah, that's some real good British ingenuity right there, because if you don't have enough time to fix it, just hope someone else will at some point. However, there is one question I have for Ganjin, and it's this. Why have they added the Churchill Mark III? there's nothing really that interesting about the tank. I mean, I don't understand why they didn't just add the Churchill Mark IV, which was not only a lot better in the war, but also had a lot more contributions. I mean, the only time I can even see the Churchill Mark III even being mentioned in history was during the Second Battle of El Alamein, which was when it was used quite effectively. But that is literally like the only time I can find it being mentioned in any history ever, so I genuinely don't understand why they didn't just go for the Mark IV. But enough about that boring history, and let's look at something more interesting, like stats. Now, at the front of the tank, you'll firstly notice it has 89mm of armour on both the front of the turret and the front of the hull. For a 4.0 battle rating, this isn't bad. I mean, it's not the best I've ever seen, but at the same time, it's definitely not the worst. And, yeah, all in all, for a 4.0 battle rating, it's alright. About passable, I'd say. So yeah, that's good. As for the sides, it's an interesting armour. You see, because most of the armour is actually on the outside of the track rather than on the inside. Now, as you can see, you're looking at around 63mm on the side of the outside of the track. And on the inside is really, really hard to tell, but I believe it's about 50mm, as you can see here, sort of roughly the whole way through. So yeah, according to these stats, the sides of this tank are also pretty well secure, so that's not too bad either, really. I mean, considering it's only a 4.0. So yeah, that's quite good. As for the size of the turret, it's actually got just less than the frontal armour, with 76mm. Once again, that's alright. I mean, it would probably deflect a shell fairly easily at a good angle, so that's quite good. And as for the rear, it has 50mm, which is one of the lightest armoured parts of the tank, but in British tradition, we don't believe in running away, of course, so we always have the least armour in the rear. So that's very interesting, that. Now, as for the rest of the tank stats and modifications, we can have a look at its 57mm gun. Now, yeah, it's got 127mm for the APC-BC, which is pretty good actually for its tier. 127mm is just about more enough to beat anything at a sort of 4.0 and below battle rating, so that's quite good. However, you will have to start with the 103mm, which is not awful, but you might struggle to get some kills with it from time to time. You also go to the Mark V, which is 122mm of penetration, and the Shell Mark X if you enjoy never getting any kills. And, yes, so, all in all, the stats for it are fairly average, and indeed, it's not a most amazing tank in the world. With around 84 shells, it can hold quite a lot of ammunition, and all in all, it's a fairly well-rounded tank stats-wise. But the real question is, how does it fare in combat and in gameplay? And, well, I'm about to tell you now. So, at a battle rating of 4.0, I don't really have any problems with it. With 89mm of frontal armour, you can stop a good amount of shells, but it's not impenetrable. Most tanks at a 4.0 battle rating can definitely be capable of penetrating you, and with the better shells the Churchill has to offer, you will find it fairly easy to penetrate them. So all in all, that's fairly well balanced, and I don't really have any problems with it. However, it does have one massive problem, and this is a problem that I'm pretty sure everyone who's ever used the Churchill knows more than enough about, and that is that, well, it is a 300 horsepower engine. And for a tank that weighs around 40 tons, that is incredibly weak. I mean, compared to the Tiger, that weighs around 56 tons, that has a 750 horsepower engine. That's more than twice the power for a little bit more of the weight. So you can see just from that that the Churchill is incredibly slow. So, the question is, should you get the Churchill Mark III? Well, I think so. Like what I just said, it's a good balanced tank, you won't have too many problems with it, and all in all, it's a good bit of fun, if not a little bit on the slow side. So, that's it from me. If you did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, that's always appreciated. And until next time, I say thank you for watching, and see you then.